You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Janelle Jack, author of Self-Publishing Fast Track, 7 Easy Steps to Write Your First Book and Share Your Story. She's a self-publishing consultant who helps women spread the word about their message by writing their book. Welcome, Janelle. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt and Leah.
We're happy you're here. So, Janelle, you have both aspects, that you are an author and a consultant for self-publishing. First off, congratulations on those two aspects of your life. But let's start with being an author. When did you get interested in writing?
I've always been interested in writing. I was one of those kids in elementary school who will write her friends' stories. So it's something I've always been interested in.
Great. And then how did you decide to write a book?
I used to write stories. I wrote fiction. And so throughout high school, I will try to get my fiction novel published. And around college is when self-publishing became a big thing. So I would say a little after college is when I published my first book.
Great. And then what was the writing process for that like? Was it something that you had written for a college project or something that you've been working on?
Okay, so let me backtrack. In college, my first book was a book of poetry. So when I wrote my first novel, it was basically waking up early in the morning and writing for like an hour in the morning. However, when I wrote this book, Self-Publishing Fast Track, one chapter is about learning the fastest way to write your book. So what I did for this one was I outlined the book using beats. And then I basically spent maybe 15, 20 minutes talking into my phone. And then I I uploaded the audio to a software called Timmy.
Mm-hmm.
So Timmy basically transcribes your audio. A couple of years back, I'm sure you know the Writers or Authors Forum K-boards. And a couple of years ago, there was a really popular thread by a lady. She was a military wife, and she said that she had discovered something that made writing so easy, and that was dictation. Now, back then, it was something new to writers. Now it's common. Mm-hmm. So my process involves outlining, knowing the purpose for each chapter, and then recording the chapter on audio, and then having it transcribed with software.
Great. And so with Timmy, you'd just do an entire chapter and send it off, or just do a couple of minutes?
I will do an entire chapter, which is a couple of minutes. Initially, when I first started using dictation software, I used Dragon Naturally Speaking. But these days, there's so many choices. We have Timmy, if you want to have your own software. We have, if you want a human to transcribe it, I think there's a company called rev.com.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are things like on the Google Chromebook, you have voice dictation. On your iPhone, there's dictation. There's so many choices these days. But basically, I just talk so that the main points within a chapter are hit and understood. And whether it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, when it ends, it ends.
Right. So I've used Otter on a book that I started to write, and it's a free app that you can download, and it makes a recording of what you're saying, and then it also transcribes it as you're writing. So since it's free, it's not nearly as good as Timmy, but it's kind of interesting that you can see the words coming out just as you're saying them. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm actually in this Facebook group, and the leader of the group recommends Otter.
Oh, okay.
Well, tell us a little bit about Timmy.
Timmy is special software. It's online, it's free, and it's basically 10 cents a minute. So I think most people, maybe 1,000 words might be 15 minutes, so that will cost you about $1.50. So it's definitely an affordable option.
Sure.
Oh, great.
You came up with the whole outline for your current book, and then I heard that you're an Amazon bestseller. How did you go from transcribing your book to becoming an Amazon bestseller?
I have previously published fiction. It was literary fiction when I began under my name. And then I was interested in writing romance novellas, and I used a pen name for that because I think sometimes authors may use the same name, but it could lead to reader confusion. Because if for instance, you're writing a thriller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Under say your name is Matt Harris, and then you decide to write sci-fi, and you use your same name, Matt Harris. Well, one, those are two totally different readers or audiences.
Sure.
And also, if you understand or you learn about the Amazon algorithm, it's you have to basically train it. So that's why people tend to write in series. They tend to stick to a certain genre. So I think if you understand genre research and you understand what your readers want, it's easier for you to hit a bestseller list because Amazon has so many different subgenres on its platform.
I see. So the idea of a pen name is so that Amazon isn't trying to match the two of your books together in different genres. It thinks of you as a totally different person and therefore will give you a better rating.
Right. That's why some people who may start off writing fiction, they might have, use their real name, and then they might want to write one or two nonfiction books. Say maybe they're a scientist who likes writing fiction, but they want to write something within nonfiction. They might just put their initials in the Matt K. Harris for their nonfiction and Matt Harris for their fiction. That way, there's enough differentiation where your reader might follow you across nonfiction and nonfiction, but it wouldn't confuse Amazon's algorithms.
Great. Okay, that's excellent advice. Thank you. We've never talked about that before on our podcast, so thank you for bringing that up.
So tell us a little bit about your self-publishing consulting.
So, Leah, I think for us as authors, especially if you had a long time dream of becoming an author, right? Mm-hmm. You want to get your book out there. You want to get your book into the hands of readers. And I really think that us as authors, I identify as an author first. Yes, we publish things online, but if you are social media like Facebook and Instagram, and I'm recent to Instagram and Facebook. I've been on it about 2 years. I think July will make it 2 years, but this entire world opens up, which is of online business.
Sure.
And so what I realize is that there are people online who literally have written 1 or 2 books, and they're teaching others how to write a book. Now, the reason I found this amazing is that if you're really immersed in authorship, I should say, and in writing forums, yes, you tend to kind of look at the best-selling authors with stars in your eyes. However, when you're more in the general public or people who are interested in online business, you realize that people really appreciate learning from people who are 1 or 2 steps ahead of them. And it's actually easier to grasp certain concepts versus a person who sold millions in terms of revenue of books. They more easily understand the person who may have made 50,000 or 100,000 or even 20,000, because that person could say, here are the steps to get your book out. Here are the steps to reach readers. And so I saw someone who had 1 book who has built a strong consultancy firm. And I realized that we actually shortchange ourselves thinking that we have to be 10 steps ahead when maybe 4 steps ahead is sufficient because we're always learning.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, so that's why we don't have Stephen King on our podcast. We have authors who have written 1 or 2 books, who have recently written their books, so that it's more motivation for the person who's listening, saying, I can do it. This person just did it in the last 6 months or the last year. I can do it too.
Exactly.
So your self-publishing consultant business, do you work like one-on-one with people? Do they contact you How does that all work?
I have strategy sessions. That's if you wanted to speak to me for an hour, you can ask any question, whether it's about the writing process or about self-publishing. And then I'm going to introduce a group coaching program, and that will be limited, maybe up to 20 women who want to learn from how to create an outline all the way up to when to hit the publish button.
Great. It sounds like wonderful information. Also, that it's a small group sounds nice also.
Yes, because I have done one-on-one before, but I think with a small group, having the group component, having peers who are interested in the same thing as you is important. And I also think it's nice for them to be able to network with other people who are writing a book.
Excellent idea. Correct. Yeah.
At the same time.
You're creating a community.
Right. Do you work with authors of all types, all genres?
I work with nonfiction and fiction writers, but I also think when you are consultant, things will shift, as far as you progress. So that's what it is currently. But more so, I focus on nonfiction authors. But being that I have a fiction background, there's a lot of similarities in the basics of building, self-publishing your book. The difference is that nonfiction writers, they tend to want to use their book as additional revenue stream, or they may want to use it to enhance their brand or their business, or they may be interested in becoming a speaker and so on. So they have different needs of publishing a book. Is similar for both nonfiction and fiction writers, I think.
Great. So before we forget, how about you let us know where we can get in touch with you, because this seems like a perfect opportunity for someone to write that down.
Find me online on my website. It's buildandcreatenow.com. buildandcreatenow.com. And if you click on the top right side, you'll be able to get a free download, which is the book launch toolkit. You can also follow me on Instagram at build, the letter N, create. Build and create.
Great. So we'll have that link in our show notes and on our webpage. So if you're driving or something and you can't remember that, we'll have the link for you.
So tell us a little bit about the book launches.
If you say you're a nonfiction author and you want to launch a book, sometimes people, especially if you're on social media, you hear so often, oh, this person launched a book and they made $5,000 or they made $10,000 in a month. I think sometimes people don't realize, they don't ask themselves, how was that person able to do that? A lot of times it's because they have a platform, they have a lot of followers. When you're launching, it's important to understand the purpose of your book, especially if you're writing nonfiction, because if you understand your purpose, then you know exactly what type of readers you want to reach. And so part of launching is being able to know your target market and being able to review what exactly is working. So you will look at blurbs, you will look at maybe forums, you look at what's selling. All of these things will help you see where the gaps. If you're writing, for instance, you're writing about the paleo diet and you decide to look at books on that subject, you will see in reviews, well, this book was missing X and this book was missing Y. And so when you're launching, you can highlight those gaps. You highlight, how is this really going to benefit the reader? With the example I gave you, they're looking for how can they eat healthier? How could they have more joy in terms of, a healthy body? You basically will have to highlight the things, highlight people's joy points. Joy, health, wealth, love, those are main things that people want in their lives. So if you're able to highlight some of those things and mention them in your blurb, right? Besides having like the good cover and so on, all of those things work in your favor.
I see. So you give a little bit of it away, but don't give the whole book away.
Right, because the purpose of a blurb isn't to summarize a book. Definitely, I think the three most important things when you're launching is your cover, your blurb, and definitely, you want to have a solid book. Because even if the other things are good, if you don't have a good book if you don't present a good reading experience. If people aren't finding value from your product, and a book is a product, then it's not going to really have long-term legs. Sometimes it doesn't really matter if a book runs out of the gate as a stallion per se. It's being able to build momentum and being able to sustain your book sales.
Right. So I agree that it needs to have it needs to be a good value, and then people will pass the word and tell their friends about it and leave you a positive review. Otherwise, no one else is going to buy the book. Tell us about book covers for ebooks, and what's your theory behind them? What do we need to be thinking about when we're making a cover for an ebook?
Well, I think when you're deciding on your book cover, the title is important. You want your title to speak to your genre. You kind of have more room for creativity with fiction. With nonfiction, if you have a keyword or two in it that automatically triggers to a reader what the book is about, that's very important. You also want to look within your genre and look and see what are the similarities. Sometimes a person might feel, okay, I want my cover to look like this. I like this aesthetic. And the aesthetic doesn't match with the other books in a genre. You have to look at things like, where's the author's name? Is it at the top or bottom? What about the size? What about the colors that are used? Certain indicators, like if it's romance, most times there's a man and a woman on it. If there was like a school building, that will confuse, confuse readers.
Right.
So you definitely have to look at what is selling, look at the covers, look at the similarities, and that informs your own process.
Excellent. Thank you.
The Author Inside You podcast is sponsored by Scribophile.
Have you joined Scribophile yet? It's a great community where you can find beta readers and get critiques of your work.
One aspect of Scribophile that people like is that it is a friendly community of writers.
A community of more than 1,000 people each day on their reading and writing critiques.
If you're concerned about your writing level, don't be. Scribophile is a safe place for you to write. They have all levels of writers. And another neat thing that they have is they keep your rights protected. You have full control over your writing. Only other members will read it.
Everyone's welcome from beginner to pro, and everyone is here to learn on Scribophile. We all want to help each other. So if you want to go from being a writer to being an author, Scribophile.com is the place to get started.
So Janelle, could you give us a little bit of advice about people who want to publish ebooks specifically? Why do you think ebooks are so important?
People's heads are down in their phones.
Mm-hmm.
And they're more inclined to buy an ebook than a physical book. Of course, there are some readers who prefer a physical book, but more and more people want convenience. They don't want to have a stack of books. I love a good book. I love being able to flip through the pages. I love going to the bookstore. I'm the type of girl who prefers a mall that has an actual bookstore. Like, if there's no bookstore, I'm a bit disappointed. But a lot of people, they prefer the convenience of an ebook. So even though you may have a paperback or a hardcover book, especially as a nonfiction author, because you may have to go to events and you may want to sell your book, but ebook is definitely the primary thing you want to focus on, or it's a must-have. And I think hardcover and paperback books are in addition to, especially if what you're writing is fiction.
Excellent. That's great advice. Thank you very much.
Well, Janelle, we really appreciate you taking time to speak with us today. Do you have any advice for budding authors?
The holdup for a lot of persons who've been thinking about it is that, one, they believe that you have to be perfect in terms of what they write, or they're afraid of being judged, or they don't know how to really put their ideas out onto a page. But I think that the first thing is that if you have a lot of ideas, you could always brain dump. And then you could use beats like, what is the most logical step as you're writing your chapters. But self-publishing and the ability to self-publish is definitely a great thing, because a few years ago, and it really wasn't that long ago, there were gatekeepers. Now we could put a book directly into the hands of readers. And so it really is a privilege being able to spread your message and use your voice. And so things are always changing. I remember a few years ago, Amazon, when they introduced Kindle Unlimited, I think with borrows, it was like $1 and something when people read the book. Then it switched. Now it's like it's like less than a cent. So my point is things are always changing. There's always more competition. The industry is getting harder. It's always good if you could just jump in now versus later, because everyone has something valuable to contribute, whether it's fiction or nonfiction.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful advice and good motivational pieces.
Right. You're absolutely right, because I heard not too long ago that everybody knows something better than most people, right? There's something that you know that you know better than almost everybody else in the world. And it's possible to make an ebook out of that and to make some money.
Exactly, because there are so many stories, Matt and Leah, and so many experiences in this world that simply go unheard because people don't have the courage to write their book.
All right. Well, you've motivated me to get going on my ebook. So thank you, Janelle. Thanks for being a great guest today and joining us all the way from Trinidad and Tobago.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you from Trinidad. That's pretty cool. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I definitely want to encourage your listeners who have an idea or who may have started to write and then shove the book or shove the manuscript in the back of a drawer. I definitely encourage them to, break the silence and don't mute their own voice. Share your story, and you'll not only bring value to, yourself in terms of sometimes when we have like stories trapped in our head and we don't bring it to page, that really does affect mental health. I know mental health is a hot topic these days, but it's important to release your ideas. If it's something you've been sitting on for a long time, you will help yourself. You never know who you'll be able to help.
Thank you.
Right.
All right. Well, Janelle, thank you very much. It was wonderful speaking with you. Our email list has been growing since we first started the Author Inside You podcast.
And if you'd like to join our email list, just go to theauthorInsideYou.com and click on Contact.
Until next time.
Right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.